the upside, the downside of karma. When we start to reflect on those two sides of the coin, it becomes really easy to pray for 100 years of it. We are back, baby, with another reflection on the daily Vedantic. We are acting out here. Action is the name of the game. When I think about how active my life seems to be, part of it makes me think about there are the Gunas, the three Gunas that are described in Vedanta are three qualities. Tamasic being lethargy, sleepiness. Rajas being active, overactive. Satvik being peaceful, stillness. The goal is to shift our qualities over time. Rivers do not turn at 90-degree angles. Shift over time towards that Satvik quality. Pure satva would be an enlightened being. So the goal is to move towards that quality to where stillness is our being. So part of how active I am, I reflect on, wow, I've got a lot of Rajasic energy within me, just engaging in undertakings. But another part of me recognizes the immense value in action as a path towards spiritual evolution, a philosophical path of developing, cultivating wisdom. Because sitting quietly when that isn't your wiring and choosing inactivity, because that is what comes to mind when we think of a philosopher or a spiritual being. So often the image we have is someone just sitting quietly, isolated away from their community. And that might be the temperament for some people. The Gita has this very inclusive approach of different paths for different temperaments. And for the active person, the path that is prescribed is action. That active path is called karma yoga. Karma is, yes, it is in an overly simplistic way, talked about as some type of cosmic scorecard. And it's really nothing to do with any cosmic judge keeping track of rewards and demarcations. It actually is as simple as cause and effect. This happens, that arises. As we've said on Daily Vedantic before, there is no real concept of sin within Vedanta. Closest Vedanta gets to sin is that which agitates, and you are not punished for your sin by some cosmic entity. You're punished by the sin itself, by the agitation. Put your hand in a fire, it gets burned. No cosmic judge required. That's karma, and that's cause and effect. But karma yoga, that is action in service for others. It's not activity for activity's sake. It is action in service for others. So when I think about all of my temperamental wiring for activity, I could spill it for selfish activity, and plenty of it is spilled for that. But in that recognition of how I'm wired, the philosophical thing to do, prescribed by philosophy like Vedanta, is to use it to attach to the higher. Use this preternatural wiring that you might have and hijack it for a higher purpose. Maybe it's activity for my community. Maybe it's using my active nature towards creating these videos, towards creating this kind of project of daily episodes. It might be through writing and reflection, through discussion with others. It might be starting companies, as I've started 3 in the last few years, around different points of service that I felt. called to help with. Trying to use our natural wiring and use it for a higher purpose. That is one of my favorite aspects about Vedanta. It's so explicit to not repress your wiring, to not suppress any desires. In fact, it tells us over and over again to use our wiring for desire and latch on to something slightly higher than where we are, like climbing a ladder. You attach to something higher, then you can let go of what's below. But only after you attach to something higher. Using our wiring for attachment itself towards or desire or activity, and orienting it towards something higher that's still within reach. It's not some crazy goal. I'm not using my preternatural wiring for desire or activity towards something that's outside of my capacity. I'm constantly trying to reflect on what my capacity is, either pushing beyond what I'm comfortable with to find out where that capacity is, or dialing it back and recognizing through realism that I'm not capable of something that's way beyond what I might be. My 20s were filled with me trying to do things that were way beyond my capacities. But when you start to dial in all of these little things, dial in knowledge of your capacity, knowledge of yourself, of what you're wired for, your temperament. Mine just happens to be action, activity. There is the path for those that are not wired for activity. And maybe they're called to sit in a cave somewhere and reach enlightenment through a path of pure renunciation from society. That's not my wiring. There are plenty of sages and saints within nearly every philosophical school that come from different temperamental backgrounds. Shankara, the great titan within Vedanta, he was very active. Incredibly established in the wisdom itself through reflection, through contemplation. At 16, he was writing commentaries on the Upanishads. But he was also, by 18, by 20, by 25, he was building several orphanages. He was teaching countless students while commentating on these timeless texts. As I've said before, he was like Socrates coupled with Mother Teresa, coupled with Einstein, because he was also quite the mathematician. All in one character, but all quite active. That recognition of where you might be, many people that might be listening to this on something like YouTube or Spotify, you might find yourself recognizing that you yourself might be quite active in nature. As you start to recognize that self-awareness, and as you start to recognize the awareness around your capacities, what do you do with that? You recognize, okay, here's an area, this area of life that I can use my active nature towards the service of others. So much of Vedanta is around the words of the masters, around the texts, around the concepts. But for the vast majority of people, it is just toying with these concepts to just think about them in some cerebral, intellectual way, instead of taking on a life of service where you have to put these concepts into practice. the Ishavasya Upanishad, famously talks about praying for 100 years of karma. Not praying to get on the other side of it, to be beyond it, to transcend it, to be done with existence, but an actual prayer of a full life of karma. And I often think about, why is there a prayer for work, for service? You usually think about it in terms of, even in a Vedantic lens, as something that you chew through. You get through your karma. You serve others for an end result on the other side. But when we start to recognize the satisfaction, the joy, the natural alignment that happens when we're serving others, when I'm doing something like this, when I'm taking care of our 3 little ones, when I shift my perspective with a company that I might be getting off the ground and think in terms of, how can I work my tail off to benefit the customers or the community members? Oftentimes the customers are my own family, my own friends. When I think about, how will this benefit me? Or, oh, this would look bad if this failed. I can almost notice a doom loop in my psychology. But when there's a switch towards an orientation towards service for others, then there's a detachment from the work that we do. There's a innate satisfaction from the work itself, to where you're just in constant search for, okay, what would be most useful? What would be most helpful? In search of this feedback loop that you notice within yourself of, wow, this is really satisfying because I know it's in service of this person. And it might be as simple as cleaning the dishes at home after a long day, and your significant other, your spouse, is able to kick up their feet. We tap into that satisfaction, that alignment. It's not too hard to imagine praying for 100 years of that. Swami says it so often, and I say it in this podcast often. If Swami will say, nothing feels as good as doing what you ought to do. Nothing feels as good as doing what you ought to do. And when you tap into that beautiful alignment of what you ought to do, it's not too hard to imagine praying for 100 years of that. Not praying to be beyond it. But the downside of karma, of service for others, and it's really a beautiful, just logistical aspect when we're serving others. In karma yoga, or karma in action itself, doesn't even have to be for others, is that it's said that it heats us up to show us where our work lies. When we go from thinking, all right, this is all conceptual and I'm going to remove myself from society and it's all about sitting quietly and toying with concepts, repeating verses, thinking through, reflecting on these ideas. And we actually try to take them into the world. And you've got an 18-month-old bawling crazy, going just crazy at the grocery store, with a 3-year-old asking for everything in every aisle, and a 6-year-old running 100 feet away. And you feel like you're losing your shit. It shows you where your work lies. You have some blow up with a coworker. Or it looks like, oh no, my job security is not that secure. This relationship that everything was totally fine. And then I got this text from this person that I'm seeing, and it looks like it might, oh no, is it going south? your world crumbles. You go from thinking you got a handle on some of these deep philosophical concepts, and you're out there in the world and you get a mirror shown in your face showing you that you've got so far to go. I know that feeling so well. One of the companies that I'm running, Magic Mind, a little 2-ounce organic energy shot company that I love building this company. We're about 4 years in and have a number of awesome milestones that we've achieved. And we're approaching profitability, which is a little bit towards owning your own destiny, although that's always elusive. And growth stalled for 4 months in a row. We're still in the midst of it. We haven't figured it out to get it back on track yet. And we are 5 years in. We're so close to that hallowed ground of it being profitable and owning, quote unquote, owning our own destiny. I use that very loosely because who knows what meteor or something out of left field could happen tomorrow. That is the only psychology that you can have with a startup, is expect almost anything. But we're almost in that stable territory. And now we have to rethink through almost everything about the business to get it back on track. And it's a beautiful exercise of, can I apply this philosophy when it feels like, and there is so much uncertainty in this thing that I've poured 5 years, a lot of my own finances in, and navigate immense uncertainty when I thought we were moving towards anything but this immense uncertainty. It is its own sermon. It is its own lecture each day to think through navigating that uncertainty with as much vision, clarity as possible. I almost feel it sometimes shrinking in my body. I can feel it in my heart of, wow, like I feel like there are chains on me. Immense scarcity in my world right now. And through this philosophy, I'm able to pull my perspective up and almost watch that bodily reaction. Disconnect from outcome fixation of needing certain outcomes to happen. Disconnect from any reputation or status hit that would happen if we just didn't achieve what we set out to. Disidentify with those things and recognize that, all right, this is in service of others. That was the inception of this. And if it isn't serving others, then maybe we should move our time and resources, our attention to something that is. And I also know through experience that these kinds of moments, crucibles within companies, make them so much stronger. In the midst of no certainty on what's going to happen, there is this awareness of, wow, this is going to tighten everything. This is going to up-level every aspect of the business in a beautiful way to where this pain, suffering in any adventure, refines and gives much needed, improved perspective on every aspect of whatever that adventure is. And we either figure it out, and on the other side of it, we feel like it was an invaluable crucible to go through, Or, like I said, and I say this all the time within Magic Mind, if the universe tells us that we shouldn't exist as a company tomorrow, we should all be okay with that. And it always surprises coworkers when I say that. But it really is the healthiest. It's the only perspective that allows you to have the clarity, an abundance mindset that people talk about. The clarity instead of a completely narrowed perspective out of scarcity and out of fear that limits our visibility and our clarity. That activity, that action of building a company alongside studying and reflecting on this philosophy every morning, every day. It's for my work, my path, my progress. It has been so invaluable to show me every day, multiple times a day. Parenting, being a son, being a friend, all of these show me just how much work I have to do. Who wouldn't want a clear mirror? And whether it is a clear mirror or whether it is the joy of internal alignment, doing what you ought to do, the upside, the downside of karma. When we start to reflect on those two sides of the coin, it becomes really easy to pray for 100 years of it. That is today's reflection on the Daily Vedantic. We'll see you next time.